Hi, this is Bhaskar here, and welcome to Communicating with Others. This is a proposal leadership topic, proposal management topic, where it's beyond proposals, it's about managing yourself and managing your team. So we will be covering lots of leadership models, conflict management models, and team management models in this, as you can see from the scribbles over here. So what is communication? Communication is a way of exchanging a content so that you can impart the message to another person. Communication is information exchanged between one person to the other. So what are the goals in communication? You need to impart the information, and you need to ensure that the information you imparted gets understood by the person whom you are talking to. So communication, goals in communication. Let's go slightly deeper into the best practices of communication. Number one, understand the principles of communications. So there are multiple principles that you will need to look for. Number one, look for clarity. Clarity, principles of clarity, principles of attention, principles of feedback, principles of informality, principles of consistency, principles of timeliness, and principles of adequacy. So these are some of the principles you might need to consider while communicating with others. Yes, it's raw. Yes, it's theoretical. We all have different forms of communication, but just keep in mind these principles. So the next one is going to be understanding the components of your communication. This is where it gets slightly interesting, and while you are reflecting on this chapter, reflect on how are you going to communicate with your counterpart. So the components of a communication, the model that's being used or recommended by APMP is David Berlow's theory of communication. What David Berlow tells us, there are 5 simple stages that you might need to think to confirm that the message you're imparting gets translated into other person. So what is it? It starts with the source. The source will be a person or an individual, or it could be a team. So the source is the person who's passing the message. Then the message gets encoded in a form that's called message. And the message could be any content, picture, diagram, whatever is their presentation. That's the message. Source encodes the message. Then from message, it's passed into a channel, which could be anything, physical channels, speaking, or it could be presenting, talking, telephone, whatever the format, that's the channel. And from there, your receiver gets information, and he decodes the information in its own way, and the message gets passed to the receiver. So the SMCR is the another way of talking about this model. Source, message, then we have channel and receiver, SMCR model. So part of the model, what happens is whatever you convey, the message gets distilled in a way that the person's attitude, the person's experience, and the person's communication skills. So these are some of the softer things. Even though you convey the message, they process it in their own way. Yes, it's a deep concept, but keep that in mind. SMCR, David Berlow's communication method principles. So from then on, we're going to look into few leadership communication tools. Let's start with McGregor's Theory X and Theory Y. These are 2 different extremes. Theory X, you don't expect your counterpart, your team, to really understand whatever you're saying. So you're going to start with an authoritative leadership. So you're going to say, these people don't like working, I'm going to manage them tightly. Theory Y on the other side is, you just delegate and you just move away from this. It's pretty democratic, but it's the other extreme. But you need to choose what's the right level of leadership for you between the authoritative leadership and the democratic leadership, so that you strike a balance of delegating your task at the same time being accountable in what you're doing. That's McGregor's Theory X and Theory Y. The other one is Hersey and Blanchard, Situational Leadership. You might have heard Ken Blanchard, 1 Minute Manager and 1 Minute Series, lots of books. Situational leadership comes from there. And what he says is this: there are 4 different ways you could do situational leadership. Number 1 is telling. Number 2 is selling. then you participate, and then you delegate. As the name says, telling is a one-way conversation. Selling is one way, but there is a slight listening that's involved. Participating, it's more of listening, whereas delegating, as you know, you're delegating, you're pretty much past the ownership to the other person, but you still have to keep the accountability on that. So telling, selling, participating, delegating. Ken Blanchard, situational leadership. Moving on to two other pointers. When you delegate, as you clearly shared, you need to be remaining accountable. Then you need to encourage your team to work towards a common goal, because now from the individual thing you're moving into a common perspective as a team. Two more leadership models, but this is much more understanding of how your team is constructed. So for you to know a little bit more about the team member, a couple of things that you could do. One is Belbin's profiling. Belbin, as you can see, it has 9 different character types, and you can see that on the notes, and from specialist to plant and others. What that meant is you could see, okay, this person is a good starter, this person is a good finisher, this person digests information, and this person is has a good attention to detail. There are so many things. So depending on their attributes, you could pass the work to them accordingly. So that's Belbin's team role. Next, you have Tuckman's model of team development. This is an interesting one for me. Tuckman's model of team development, what he says it is, when you put a team into together for work, first you form a team. So bring the individuals to the form a team. Then storming. Storming is where they try to clash, they try to work together, they try to understand each other to kind of start to blend together. Then once they storm, then they get into norming. Norming is a way like, okay, now we know who's who, now we know what we believe in, now we know what our strengths are. You start a normalcy, and from normalcy you start to perform. Okay, one person gives more, one person gives less, they balance it somehow and they move on. So norming, storming, first one is forming, norming, forming, storming, norming, performing. Then move into adjourning, where you gradually try to move the team away because the project is about to finish. And finally mourning, where everybody goes on with a heavy heart, hey, it's a good team, let's have a drink, let's celebrate, something like this. So what team development goes through the cycle in your organization, see how that works. So that's Tuckman's model of development. Finally, in a team, you know, conflicts does happen. So how can you anticipate and manage conflict? As I say, conflict resolution is just a part of conflict management. Conflict resolution is just a part of conflict management. So Maccoby and Scudder's 5-step process of conflict is one of the way of looking into conflict management, where you actually start to think, you anticipate, then you present, then you identify, you manage, and then resolve. Theoretical concept, but in a conflict, plan it off in these 5 ways and then see how you could resolve the conflict. So again, anticipate, present, identify, manage, and resolve. Conflict resolution, conflict management. So once you have done that, then the last way is balances. It's called Thomas-Kilmann's conflict resolution. What it does is it just checked how cooperative you are in one axis versus how much you are willing to go for assertiveness in your model. So it's pretty much like how much you cooperate, non-cooperate, how assertive are you, how aggressive are you. So that meant you have different blocks of conflict management, and to see what parts you would going to manage them around this. That's Thomas-Kilmann's conflict resolution. There are 4 or 5 blocks, again the same keyword like what we saw. It's competing, collaborating, compromising, accommodating, or avoiding. Competing, it's going to be you. It's one way you want to win regardless of what the other person is going to do or not. Okay, it's all about you. Competing. Collaborating, you start to give something more and you start to give a little bit more, and you start to work together to manage the conflict. Compromising is win-win, the best thing. Then you have accommodating. Accommodating is you pretty much give most of it, just you want to keep the relationship. Finally, avoiding, it's like, I don't want this, I'm walking away. I can't solve the conflict, and you move on. So these are some of the conflict management principles. So very quickly, best practices: understand principles of communication, understand the components of communication, understand leadership models, understand team management models, and finally you then look into conflict management. Yes, it's slightly dense, lots of theoretical topics, but the important thing is apply what you can apply and understand what your personal attributes are, and you take it from there.